Can you hear me? There we go. That sounds much louder. Okay. Well, thank you all. So let's just dive in because we want to get as much talking in as possible. We want to start off with just kind of, if you can go down the line, introduce yourself. In particular, let's talk, if you can, as the introduction, talk about what channels you look over, what kind of scale you're dealing with, and then also, if you're comfortable with it, what sort of technology you're using to capture data, analyze data, that sort of thing, and then that can help everyone get their bearings of where you're coming from as we talk. So.
Hey guys, Matt Annerino. I work at Live Nation Concerts. I run all of our direct marketing, email, mobile push, some stuff on our website as far as engaging fans. This is my 12th year there. As far as scale goes, very, very strong on the database side. We have a database of 27 million people, opt-ins in North America, which I help to culture and nurture. As far as technology, we're a Salesforce shop. Teradata is our data warehouse. That's where we do most of our data mining and modeling and things like that.
Hi everyone, Amy Bartle. I'm the Director of Integrated Media with La Quinta Inns and Suites. Within that role, that means if it's paid and consumer facing, it's mine. So I have TV, radio, social, paid search. So I have all, branding media, direct response media, all the messy stuff in the middle. And so from a data perspective, we have early on back in '09 this connection of the offline-online worlds in media as consumers were beginning to change platforms is really what we wanted to make sure we were on the edge of. So, like most of you, Adobe and Google Analytics are part of the mix. DoubleClick, of course, but the secret sauce that we couldn't make really good decisions without is our custom marketing mix model that includes both online and offline media data that we have with a local shop in Dallas.
Hey guys, I'm Jeff Bartlett. I'm the Senior Marketing Manager at Avvo. I'm primarily in charge of content strategy on the B2B and B2C side for Avvo, some of our sister brands within the Internet Brands legal vertical, which would be martindale.com, noble.com, lawyers.com primarily. As far as audience size, if you combine those B2B and B2C audiences, it's in the tens of millions. We are a Salesforce shop as well. Talking about data on the technical sense beyond that and how data flows into and out of Salesforce is a little bit beyond the scope of what I do, but it's really complicated, would be the way to put it. We have many, many data sources and sort of keeping track of those in a meaningful way is one of the challenges I think we all face as marketers.
And at the risk of sounding like I'm phoning it in, I'm just going to ask to start off with the question of our topic of how does branding fit in a data-driven world?
Way to prep, Mr. Moderator.
Let's start high level.
This off the screen.
I do promise I have real questions after that, but let's just start high level as well.
I'll go first. I mean, I think if we're just focusing on performance-driven marketing, if that's all we're doing, you never get that repeat customer. You never, I mean, we all make all of our money on that second purchase and the direct traffic source and the contract that doesn't churn. And I think you need branding for those things to happen. If we're just relying on every single person that comes into our funnel is going to click a Google ad or a Facebook ad or start with whatever that marketing strategy is, if you don't make a connection with that person, they're never going to come back. I mean, they're just on to the next brand that is running an ad the next time they need whatever your product or service is. So without branding, how do you make that step from, I mean, you have to have that. You have to have a story. You have to communicate that story effectively. And that's where the money is. I mean, you can't, if the only way to grow your business is to spend more money on Google and Facebook, you're going to lose.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things I say is you can spend all the money you have on optimizing paid search, and if that's the only place it goes, it only lasts until nobody searches for you anymore. But But broader than that is, you know, I think Steve nailed it. This whole focus on digital media and data has an inherent bias to it. And somewhere along the line, we have entire groups of people, either our peers or sometimes within our own companies or across the industry, that have forgotten the fact that branding is a marketing function. Data and different media platforms are the tactics and tools we use to brand with. So how does it fit? Is a data-driven world allows you to brand better in a more contextually relevant way in the right place. That's my soundbite.
That's a good soundbite.
I like it.
I like it. I can't beat that. You know, it's interesting. We have an interesting problem. I wouldn't call it a problem at Live Nation, but our customers are loyal to artists and they're loyal to bands. They're not necessarily loyal to the promoter who produces the show. So as a brand, when we're marketing an event, we don't compete. We don't try to compete with our bands or our clients rather. But where we have to differentiate and where we have to promote the brand is in the experience. We are competing with other concerts. We're competing with going to a baseball game, a night out at the movies, which at this point is almost as expensive as a concert. And so we think about branding as our experience. We have the ultimate IRL product, if you will, but other people do. And so we focus a lot of our branding efforts around our venues and around the venue experience and strengthening the Live Nation brand through that. So if we can give you a great experience walking through the door and you're reminded that it's a Live Nation venue and we are nurturing you up until that event after you purchase with, you know, different VIP opportunities or insider information or giving you traffic information before you get there, that really strengthens our brand as an event producer, as a venue owner. And so we don't do a whole lot of just straight brand marketing, but try to infuse that, that brand within the experience.
And so from an experience standpoint, especially two of you, and a little bit, I guess you can extend it to people's relationships with the lawyers that they find and things like that. Consumers don't yet have chips in them that allows us to track all their bio and all that. So how do you tie data into the experience and the brand, and how does that function, you know, once you've actually converted them to get to, you know, what Jeff said about the second experience, the third experience, all of that? Like, how are you tying experience back into your data pool?
The majority of our customers only go to one and a half shows a year. So, you know, for us, getting that incremental sale is highly important and highly profitable. So we spend a lot of time analyzing data and looking at that you know, relatively large group of people who are only going to one show a year, and treating them a little bit differently than those who are going 5-6 times a year. We know that they're going to keep coming back. Those who spend a lot of upfront money on season seats and boxes, we speak directly with them through our sales team. But we focus a lot of our efforts around getting that extra ticket from that group of people. You know, we focus on fans' affinity for the bands that they've seen, those that they like, those bands that are similar, inform that via third-party data to try to get, you know, if you're sitting on the fence, you know, what is going to be that trigger that gets you over that fence?
Well, and what about the experience itself? Like, after they've gone, you know, how that VIP parking or the VIP lounge or the drink experience on the bar you've just upgraded, like, are you tracking that in any way with data and tying that back in? Or?
Yeah, we are. Tying back in is a work in progress. But it's important that we tie that offline online data together because it's highly valuable. We have an identity problem in that you only buy for every 3 people. Essentially, you only know one of them. You only know the ticket buyer, but they're bringing friends. They buy 2.5 tickets, 3 tickets on average, 4 tickets on the high end. So all those people that are coming into that experience, you don't know. So the way that we try to capture that is through going with paperless tickets or even ticketless events where your phone is your ticket. That helps us to identify the people that are coming to the show, and then subsequently what they're buying there. So a lot of geofencing activity, turning our app into a mobile ordering system for food and beverage helps us tie back to the fan. And then re-engaging them post-show with an offer or simply with just a soft touch. Thanks for coming. We run an experience survey after the fact, which we have really great response rates. I think it provides us with a hell of a lot of information, but it also provides the fan with a feeling that we care about the experience, and we'll try to make it better next time. And so a lot of different data points, a lot of different data sources between the ticket and the app and the point of sale systems, but all very important, all very much a work in progress.
Well, and post-stay, when your data can kick in much stronger once somebody's actually become a customer and, more importantly, likes you well enough to authorize that transaction. So, that's really, is interesting in having a conversation last night, beyond the separation of branding and digital, the separation of CRM and branding is also very distressing. That's a whole other conference. But to that layer is, once someone has said, yes, I like you, yes, I'll join your program, you can leverage that data in a way that's helpful for them in terms of how you personalize the website, remembering what type of room they book, remembering what their favorite hotels were. But I think more importantly to this conversation comes into how do you use the data in an acquisition sense when it's an unknown? And there are some really tremendous ways to do that that are in terms of identifying likely customers. For example, in our world, we have more, there are more business travel nights of the week than there are weekends. So we look to acquire business travelers. There's a lot of data sources out there that can let you identify people who travel for business, and then how do you reach out to them with some content or some messaging, very similar to the Virgin example that Aaron had, that's not about buy my hotel room, but something that's relevant to their business work life, something that's funny. We did a riff on handshakes that, that catches attention. But building the familiarity, using data to find the potentially right audience, to build enough familiarity that then when they come to interact with you, they feel comfortable enough to give you an email, to visit your website, to interact with some of your content. So you can pick up that data trail and continue to do. And then you can do just the brass tacks. Like, we retarget our video exposures with other content pieces. And so it sounds kind of strange to retarget your own advertising, but to build a conversation and to build enough interaction with someone to think they know enough about you to actually care is one of the ways that we try to get past this clutter of everyone looks the same.
And if I can talk about our B2C model, I mean, we're really trying to make the legal process easier for consumers. I mean, nobody wants, yeah, right. Which means our opportunity for, theoretically, you don't need a lawyer all the time. Like, you're not constantly in legal trouble. I'm making an assumption here. It's a big assumption. But so our opportunity for branding there, it's to deliver on that promise. It needs to be easier. We're saying it's going to be easier for you to select a lawyer and find the right lawyer for you, and it has to be. So really our opportunity for making that connection with the consumer is while they're going through that process. And again, you're probably not going to go through that process again 3 weeks from now, hopefully. So we have to make sure that like, and we're following up. We're doing satisfaction surveys, and we do a lot of user experience research where we're actively polling, asking what the experience was like. We're informing our product development with that. But it's not the kind of a business model where we're gonna like run ads all the time because you've used our product before. Like, hopefully you're done with our product now. So it's an interesting situation, and really it just makes the focus for us. I mean, if it's supposed to be a fast, easy process, then the timeline for that fast, easy process is our opportunity to make that connection, and we're reliant upon that being a positive experience. So the next time that person needs a lawyer, they think of Avvo.
So let's talk a bit about incrementalism. Like, this is a topic I'm kind of fascinated with. And let's start a little bit with and to define it, the constant let's improve by 0.1%, or let's improve this a little bit. When do you say no? How do you know when incrementalism isn't going to be worth the return on investment? Everyone has time and budget constraints, no matter how big you are. How do you make those decisions? You can't analyze everything because it would take too damn long to analyze everything. So how do you do that balancing act? How do you make those decisions?
So as we look at it, there has to be enough scale for incrementalism or lack of it to make a difference. For example, we all live in a world, if you go to a website and you look at something, that something is going to haunt you across the web forever, it feels like. We used to spend a significant amount of money in that site retargeting until I did a no media test against it and found that there are distinct pockets of visitors who respond and those who don't. And so we no longer retarget a significant portion of our website traffic because they converted at exactly the same rate when I didn't give them retargeting ads. Now, the data said that there's a tremendous return on investment, but from a revenue standpoint, I lost not a dime when I stopped showing them ads, and I gained marketing dollars to shift to other layers. So the first thing when it comes to incrementality is, are you spending enough money to make a difference if you stopped spending it, or is the upside big enough that a 1% can make a difference in a revenue stream to your company? Because we'd all love 5, 10, 20%, but we all know when you start testing incrementality, if you can get anything in the statistically significant range, it's good. So really, something that's, tenths of a percent of a budget will either just ride on until I get there, or will kill it for bigger initiatives.
It's a trap, isn't it? Like when you talk about, there was a note on the screen during the opening comments that basically said, we've moved all of our advertising to digital because we have to, because that's the thing I can track from the click to the conversion with absolute clarity, and I'm in a situation where I have to do that. And we were excited, right? We were all excited when we were finally able to track things. There's this whole generation of marketers who were putting ads in the paper and in billboards that had no idea if they were successful or not, and we were reliant upon direct marketing to tell us some of these things. But it's a trap. We're at this point where we're unwilling to do anything unless I can draw a straight line from my ad spend to recurring revenue, and we're sort of drilling down into like incremental improvements along that path, but it's not the whole story. I mean, it's easier to pitch to your CEO and say, hey, look, we improved 10% this quarter in this one channel, but it's not the sum of marketing, and it's why so many content marketers are pulling their hair out right now trying to draw a straight line from bounce rate and time on page and scroll depth to recurring revenue, because there are CEOs going, well, how can you justify this content spend? And it's because branding doesn't always have that direct line to MRR. So we're looking at customer satisfaction, we're looking at churn rate, we're trying to look at direct traffic, like some of these real growth, like not growth hacking, like actual growth for our brand. And it's hard because you can get lost in incremental gains and you miss the big picture.
And, okay, he just hit one of my hot buttons. Do you mind if I jump in? Because data is not insight and analytics. Because DoubleClick said someone saw a banner ad before they booked, does not mean the banner ad had anything at all to do with it. You know, does the fact, you know, just as I have people in my organization tell me TV doesn't work. And I'm like, oh, really? I said, where'd you buy your school supplies? Oh, Target was having a great sale. How'd you know that? Oh, I saw an ad. Where? Oh, TV. Yeah, so none of this is a vacuum. In fact, I was just, the Association of National Advertisers has just kicked off the Advanced TV Task Force that we're working on, which, you know, and that's the next let's connect a data point layer. And interestingly enough, for those first movers in the space, they measure it the same way you measure regular TV. If we want to talk data, then everybody needs to get really good at understanding regression modeling. Data is not just something that you can pull out of your Omniture reporting or pull out of your Salesforce reporting. Data has to be put together in a meaningful platform, analyzed by actual honest-to-God data scientists or really good business intelligence analytics people, and brought together, because correlation is not causation, and an Omniture report will never give you causation. And that's exactly the thing we all stress with. Social. According to my mix model, in the space of 6 quarters, my social content has become the #1 driver of visits to my brand.com website. I can guarantee you there are not enough clicks on my social content to connect that. But I have 10 years of track records of results with this model that says that that information coupled with business intelligence gives me enough direction to say I shouldn't cancel social spending. And that's our trap. That's the data trap. If it's easy data without insights and analytics, you don't know where you're going.
I like your point about scalability. I think when we assess an idea or initiative or a question, I always look to, is it scalable? Is it scalable from a operational perspective? Is it scalable from a revenue perspective? Like, what are we going to get for this effort on the project from our people? What are we going to give up? What's the opportunity cost for another project? Sometimes that doesn't matter at all, and no one gives a shit, and you just have to do it. So you test. I've found it much easier to get my point across if I can create some sort of micro test that's not too much effort, that's not a heavy lift, and the budget's relatively small to either prove one case or another. A lot of times I'm right. I've been doing this a long time. Sometimes I'm wrong. And sometimes you learn things in the course of doing a test that the operational load is a lot greater than you thought, or there are a lot more risks than you thought. And there's a lot more downside to doing it one way or another. So it's not easy to say no or to push back, but it's a lot easier when you have some data to back it up.
So let's go down that rabbit hole a little bit more, because we all have colleagues that we have to interact with. We have internal clients or leadership that we have to explain things to. Theoretically, we're all professional communicators. So what's the most effective way to communicate to your colleagues and leadership around this idea of incrementalism, and how do you say no? How do you get people to understand without having to put together a 50-page PowerPoint deck with all the data to explain it?
Well, in addition to you can do a lot under the guise of testing to get the data points you need, as Matt had said. There's also the layer of, in our culture, there's a lot of advanced conversational campaign. For example, in my retargeting example, I knew if I just would have walked in cold and said, hey, I did a test and we should stop retargeting 30% of the web traffic, my CMO would have instantly said, I can't hear you, no. And so frankly, I spent 6 weeks, 3 of them after I already had all the data and knew, but just in conversation with our, the SVP of digital commerce and with the CMO, hey, I'm looking at the early results of the test, I'm really surprised, this is what I'm seeing. And to the layer of professional communicators is we all know in our own culture what works. And sometimes, some companies I know it's, well, first you send an email to the CEO that you have some really interesting data coming up at the next executive committee. Would you like you to walk you through it first? As I said, in ours, it's a lot of interdepartmental, let's just drop in and share what interesting thing I'm seeing. But it becomes, whichever in your company, kind of opens the minds to the idea that there's a different idea coming down the road.
You have to build that trust with internal stakeholders first, for sure. I mean, you can't just walk in and overturn a conference table and say, this is how we're going to do things from now on, and you're going to have to trust me. I mean, maybe you guys can do that. I can't get away with that. But it is a little bit easier to do that because you can test your way into some of these things. So you don't have to come and say, I have this idea, and you're going to have to trust me. You can say, I have this idea, let's run a test. This is our KPI. I truly believe that if we stop doing X and start doing Y, we're going to see an improvement in the KPI. And there's not always a direct line, but you can still do that. And I love that we can ABR test. I mean, we're not sitting in rooms anymore arguing about what the best call to action is going to be for an email. We don't have to. I just pick 3 of them and let the data bear it out and feel good about how great of a marketer I am. And we don't. It's more effective. Like I'm happy to have data. I mean, I'm a marketer. I'd love to know what all my customers ate for breakfast. I can't do anything actionable with that, but I still want that data. But it is, you really just have to build the trust. And that might take time. I mean, you can't necessarily walk into a new company or talk to a new CEO or CMO or boss and say, hey, I've got this crazy idea, and by the way, I'm this awesome marketer, and you're just going to have to let me go run with it.
Just trust me.
Yeah, right. I haven't had much success with that one.
Well, it also sounds like it's
me neither.
Not just about just trust me, but also the data can give you hard facts, but sometimes hard facts are just that, right? They're a wall, and so you got to kind of create a ramp to get over the wall, right? Instead of just trying to run through it.
Yep. Yeah, and that credibility is important. I mean, we've all run into people in our organization. It doesn't matter how many facts you give them. Their perception is their reality. There's someone I interact with who is convinced if you have a Hulu subscription, that means you no longer have any other TV access other than Hulu. So, data doesn't matter.
So, on the spirit of data doesn't matter, and on the spirit of throwing the desk over and saying screw it.
We get to demonstrate, right?
When do you say screw the data? When do you let your gut, let brand, let feelings, or do you ever do that? At what point does data not matter?
Well, I think with experience comes intuition. You intuitively know something's going to work or not, and if you have a really strong, gut about it, you might not need to test it, right? Or you might make that testing, that ramp, very short. Also, I'm in client service essentially. I run an internal agency, so I have stakeholders and clients that don't care about the numbers that I say, and that's fine, right? We have, I have clients, they have clients. A lot of those clients are artists who, have different demands and opinions about different things, and sometimes you just got to throw away the data and go for something big. But I think that you know, there are certain things that you have to do for your clients that you might disagree with, but at the end of the day, building that trust allows you to do other things. And you know, also there's this business value, right, to overanalyzing the data, right? Mm-hmm. So if I know that this one person bought this upsell product right after they purchased, do I exclude them from the, you know, the third upsell message that we're going to send? Yeah, maybe, but it's going to take a hell of a lot of time and effort to productize that data and get that into an exclusion filter and do all this work on our pre-show journey to make sure that we not only are capturing people who are buying, but also excluding people who did this, that, or the other thing. And the business value to not sending that message, it becomes very small as compared to what you have to do to get there. So, you know, in that example, you just got to say, I could focus on something else.
I mean, sometimes ROI is not just ROI down the road with your consumers, but it's your internal ROI, right? Like
Absolutely.
your time has value. Right?
Well, it's the time, and I think that's, you know, what Matt hit on was two things that are really incredible. One is, you know, Malcolm Gladwell did the whole book on it, Blink. It's, you know, that gut is not just because I think so. I mean, that is your professional career accumulation of knowledge that tells you, based on everything I know, this is the right move. It's easiest to follow those when the data is missing or nebulous. Ambiguous data is a marketer's best friend, because if it tells you, I don't know, then it's your professional credibility and best judgment that takes you through. If it's small stakes, who cares? If the CEO wants you to put a particular post out on you know, social media, and you know, legal doesn't think it's going to cause a major crisis for the company, post the damn thing, whatever. Right. So to scale is the lower it is in terms of risk and financial, both financial and professional, and for your company, the easier it is to just disregard data. Really, it's when you're competing for a very limited number of resources that the data seems to carry a bigger weight, because it's not just it's multiple areas now affected, and you're choosing not to do things as well as choosing what to do.
We touched on a couple things I'd like to mention here. One is that unless you have artificial intelligence running your entire marketing stack, which is probably on the horizon, there's actual human intelligence involved at some point. Like, we have to make decisions. We're all being paid for something, I think, and that something is that. Yeah. So you have to be okay with that. You have to be okay saying the data implies this, or the data is not here in time, or we have so much data that it's not necessarily actionable on the timeline that we're trying to operate on. We're going to do, you know, this is a decision we're going to make. You have to do that. You have to be okay with that. And does that mean like we're, you know, saying screw it, we're just going to ignore the data? Usually not. I mean, it's not that black and white. But again, you have to be comfortable making marketing decisions. And then the other piece I'd like to touch on is this, you mentioned, it's just this glut of data. I mean, you know, we have data coming from all these different sources. We have sister brands within a vertical. They're generating data from many of the same sources that are going into different databases than ours aren't well integrated yet. I mean, we have so much data that doing anything meaningful with it is a tall order. And so whatever campaign you're building, whatever you're doing on the brand side, it's that 90-10 rule, that the last 10% of a project is going to take you as much time as the first 90% is. Like, you have to ship it. At some point, you have to say, this is good enough. Whatever resources we're going to invest in the next 10% of this project are you know, it's this idea of incrementalism, where whatever the incremental gain is, it's not worth shipping this and moving on to the next thing. Like, somebody has to make that call, and I think that's what brand marketing is in a lot of instances, is making that call, and that's what we do.
It strikes me that there's also a theme here of the data can help drive your strategy, but your strategy has to drive your data too, right. Yes. Or else you'll just be constantly chasing the glut, right? Chasing the data points. Like, your strategy has to inform you what data you're going to focus on, right?
We're not passive consumers of marketing data. We're not victims of data, I would hope.
So does the data, whether it's data or this incrementalism thing, does it ever hurt branding? You know, when does it hurt branding?
I would argue it only hurts branding if you let yourself get buried in the data and forget your strategy. In everything you do, you absolutely nailed it. Your strategy has to drive what the relevant data points you are. If you get distracted by data points and head down rabbit holes that are divorced from your strategy, that hurts. But as long as you continue to come back to what is the strategy we're executing against, how does what we're working on line up to that strategy, is it still in line, you're okay.
Yeah, in our instance, we have this legal Q&A forum, and I would absolutely say that many of the more popular topics in our Q&A forums would be fantastically viral if we promoted those questions, and would absolutely submarine my brand because they're totally inappropriate. So you can't just look at a list of like these are the most likely to perform in an SEM campaign of the topics that are available, because just because people are searching for those things doesn't mean I want to stake the reputation of my brand on them.
Kind of similar to the Affleck scenario, right, where they have tons of data on probably all these amazing stories, but you can't mine that stuff, right? Because that's divorced from the strategy.
Yeah,
so
I'll add that our VP of Organic Marketing sent me a message the other day that said, I'm losing faith in humanity looking at the top searched keywords on our website right now.
Yep.
Sorry, Jeremy.
So we have a few minutes left. Any questions that we wanted to go to?
Paul Friedland, eBay. Can data be a competitive advantage? Branding most certainly is. Your strategy is most certainly a competitive advantage. Can data be a competitive advantage? And
Yes.
I would probably clarify that by saying, can it be a sustainable competitive advantage?
I would say yes, particularly if you think about it, there's a lot of data out there about brands. Just like, we had the example of the reputation score, there's the brand asset valuator, there's multiple companies out there. So even just data on your own brand assets compared to your competitive set is one way that it definitely can be a competitive advantage, so you can lean into your competitor weak spots. And some of the other is depending on how well you can execute on your actual customer data in a way that can change behavior or drive incremental behavior.
I also think that with data, someone's going to collect the data at some point. So part of the competitive advantage is how is it collected, whether or not you own it, you have the best collection. And to your point about like the ticketing, the mobile ticketing, or the paying for things or things like that, it's almost hand in hand, right? Like the branding and the data is the same thing because you're creating an experience that is driven by the data but also drives the data, and they're tied hand in hand. To me, that's the most powerful like competitive advantage with data, is when you actually create that relationship with the consumer where you're saying like, we're going to trade data. You're going to give me yours, I'm going to give you mine. That's going to make our relationship deeper. Like, that's a competitive advantage there for sure.
Is the data doing anything to drive and change your brand identity? I mean, I want to sort of tie this back to what Catherine was talking about in her 4 E's, and also pointing forward to talking to some of the direct-to-consumer brands that we'll be seeing later this morning. All of them are aiming towards being meaningful brands, and they have some sort of either a tie to the identity of the consumer in a unique way, or they've woven themselves into the everyday life of their consumer in a unique way. And I'm curious if the data is informing or moving you towards rethinking your brand identity, or if brand identity is a part of this equation, if you guys are having those conversations about who are we to a consumer in such a cluttered marketplace.
So, interestingly enough, over the past, 8 years at La Quinta, it absolutely has. And you know, one of the things that happened in the travel industry is with the takeover of the online travel agencies and the meta search partners is you have an entire sales channel that has managed to commoditize hotels down to price and location, where based on a Google Map search, you may be comparing a Waldorf Astoria product to a Hampton Inn on price and location, which is frightening to anyone in, you know, and just as the same as Amazon commoditizes other products. So we actually, working with a brand data company, looked to what are the things we and our competitors are known for, what are the things that make you stand out as a non-commoditized product in the eyes of a consumer. And we have actually, over the past 8 years, been building our advertising and branding communications and campaigns based on driving those attributes that take us out of the commoditization sector.
Yeah, I think I mean, obviously, data helps you create better content, right, and more relevant content. Going beyond relevance, it is content of value, and I think that that naturally strengthens your brand, right? If I know that our newsletter is going to surface to the top artists or shows or events that are of value to our customers, because we have that breadth and depth of data on them and on people who look like them and who buy similar artists, my brand gains value by giving them those opportunities to have that experience. You know, we promote a lot of shows, we collect a lot of data, and that helps to enrich our online experience. And I think that naturally helps to strengthen the brand.
I think too, just one thing on the data, we tend to focus on data as numbers, but it's not just numbers. And I think to some of the things about conversations and human interaction, and humans are still, to your point, maybe not long, but humans are still the best pattern recognition machines available. And so to have data where we have conversations, where you go and you speak to the general managers at 20 different venues, at 20 different hotels, you know, you talk to 20 different lawyers, and just have a conversation for half an hour and let the human mind take those data points to create the right questions you can ask to get the numerical data. Like that, to me, like branding wise, those conversations and that data is hugely important beyond the number ones.
Another one over here.
Great. My name is Michael Chalk. I'm with MIQ. We're an analytics, technology, and insight firm. I wanted to ask a question to Amy. What you said is so pertinent. How do you transform data and into insight and action? So I'd love to hear a little about the process rigor and resources that you guys have employed, and it's open to everyone, to actually take that Omniture report and turn it into something usable.
Well, and that's something that's really difficult for all of us, because nobody has an unlimited ceiling on how much headcount you can put into an organization. You know, along the way is, you know, we have looked for nimble, smart, small companies to do some of the heavy lifting. As I said, my mixed model is you know, best in class, but it's not one of the, you know, big two that you'll find in the first website. You know, it's understanding that if you want to get the best performance out of your media, part of your media spend has to be invested in media analytics. And that's challenging because none of us have enough media dollars. If you're Coca-Cola, you don't have enough media dollars. Nobody has enough media dollars. Nobody has enough headcount. And so and to the layer of incrementality, you have to figure out how much of those marketing budgets or how much of those joint marketing IT budgets need to be invested in tools that help you really optimize the rest of your spend. And for some companies, they build it all in-house. Other companies will outsource. But first, it has to come down to identifying what you can optimize, what can give you the most value to optimize, and then what is your most effective and cost-efficient way to do that.
I think Steve's going to push me off the gondola later if we don't cut this off. So.
Well, we're going to continue this in a roundtable at the end of the morning that Amy is going to lead, a veteran of our roundtables and our summits. Bryan, everybody, thank you very much.